Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? You can use the chat if you can't hear me. And let us know. We'll get started. We're supposed to have about 20. Looks like we got about 13 right now, so we'll give the last few people a couple minutes and then we'll get started. The max that you can have.
So the deal is, they'll ask questions out here in the chat box. I'll write them down and call them to his attention because he's going to be focusing on here. Okay. So you can answer any questions. It's kind of nice. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
All right, for the last few that have just joined, just make sure that you can hear me. If you can't hear me, let me know in the chat. Which, if you can't hear me, that's not going to help too much. But we will get started here in a couple minutes. We're supposed to have about 20, so we'll start about 1:05. Oh yeah, definitely. That would be fun.
It would be. Bicycle.
Just drive that to work. Right down the street.
Oh, I've seen, yeah, those are getting more popular. I always wanted a scooter. My dad had one. He said it had just not enough power to get him out, game killed. It didn't have enough power. I went and got my motorcycle endorsement, and I took the class and everything. And I'll never forget the instructor's like, I'm going to pass you. But you might want to start on a scooter. I have a daughter who, I don't know if she still has her or not, but she had her, and she had her own scooter. Both of my son-in-laws have Harleys, big ones. I got it because my husband has one. And I kept thinking, we're going to be somewhere. Nothing's going to happen.
You have to have it.
Exactly. That's why I got it.
That's smart. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So first and foremost, the documentation for this is available on our website, civicacmi.com. And if you come down, right here you have end of year documentation now available. If you click here, it'll take you to all of these end of year docs. This Authority Finance one, hopefully everyone's in the right session. The Authority Finance one is the one that we'll be following through. It's the exact same as last year, but we'll just go through this step by step. If you guys have any questions along the way, go ahead and type them in chat. I have Debbie and Rhonda both here to flag any questions, as I'll be pretty much pertaining to the walkthrough. So just let us know if we need to slow down or anything like that, okay? So first things first, when you're getting ready to close the year, you've already closed November, so right now you have December and January open for posting. What we want to check is to make sure that we haven't accidentally posted any encumbrances, expenses, or revenues into January already that we didn't mean to. So we need to start by looking at our future posting. We'll go into our budget control menu, and under our standard budget reporting, you have future posting reports. If you run the future month fund report, this will show you everything that's posted to January, your future month. Give this a second. First report of the day, probably. So there's nothing wrong with posting to January. It's just something you want to be aware of, as this report, if you haven't posted anything to January or haven't meant to post anything to January, this report should show all zeros. It should come back. That's just the first report of the day. Okay, so this will break it down by fund. It'll tell you any revenues that have been posted to the fund, any expenses, or any encumbrances. Like I said, we don't ideally really want anything posted in January, so we would like to see all these as zeros. But like I said, if you know you've entered a receipt or you've entered an expense, it would show on this report, and as long as you've accounted for it, there's nothing wrong with that. So our future report looks good. It is all zeros, so we know we're working strictly in December. Okay, the next step on here is entering the budget. I will show you a quick way to enter the budget. You can enter the budget, or at least get the batch started in December. That way when you actually do roll the year, you'll already have it done, and you can just update the batch and be done with budget. The quickest way, I think, is going to be to do your expense account description report. You have one of these for expense and you have one of these for revenue, and it will basically just list out all of your accounts with their description. I think this helps because you can quickly take this to Excel and you can save it as your expense budget. Save it to your desktop, wherever you want to keep those things saved. and now you have a working Excel file for your budget upload. I would delete these 2 lines. They aren't really needed. They're not going to affect your upload. You can keep this line as well if you'd like. I would personally delete it. In authority, you can attest to it. So in your column B, if you want to see your lines. So here's where you would enter your budget. You can do so on and so forth, and enter your budget lines, the amount that's going on for each account. I'm only going to do a few of these and then cut the rest off, because we have quite a few test accounts. It's just going to save us some speed. Okay, so you've entered in all of your expense amounts for all your expense accounts. Now we just need to resave this Excel so that we can upload it back into Authority Finance. You come up to File, and your Save As. You select your current folder wherever you want to save it. This is already labeled. All we want to do is our type. We want to change it to a CSV file. That's going to be this one right. Yeah, your CSV. Use that as the drop down for your file type and click Save. It'll pop up this. Some features are different with CSV files. You want to keep the format. You do. So you click Yes. And then now you can close this. For whatever reason, whenever you try to close a CSV after you save it, it asks you if you want to save it again. You can hit Don't Save. It's already been saved. And there's my file. To get this into Authority Finance, all I need to do is to start our budget transaction processing, and I just need an expense budget entry. Now, 2 things here are critical when you start your new batch. 1, the mode. You want the mode to be the original budget. And 2, you want your batch date to be in January. That is the most important thing. Don't have your batch in 2016 in an original. You'll overwrite your entire 2016 budget, and we'll have to restore. So make sure your mode is original. Make sure your batch date is in January, and go ahead and update the batch. So now that we have our batch open, we can do a file import, and we can import that file we just created with our budget. When we click on the file import, it looks like this. You actually manually map these options down here. Only the account and amount are required. The references and remarks are optional. So we click on Find a File. This is where we can find our expense budget CSV file. When we click on it and we say Open, it's going to ask you this. A file with the same name already exists. You might not get the same name, but do you want to override? Always say OK to overriding the file. You don't want to use a prior file. This is the one you'll see every time. The file has not been imported before. Do you want to use the last import definitions? The import definitions are the column mappings. I would recommend not doing it just because you're going to manually do it yourself. So you would say no here. And now all of these columns are unmapped. So all we got to do is map them. Is you click on your column heading and drag it down to where it's going to be. So our account goes in our account, and our amounts go into our amounts. If you had, a 3rd column and a 4th column that were either one of these, you could drag and drop them to those. Second thing to look at is the first row of data. I purposely left this blank because you might put headings in here. You might put account and you might put amount up here. We want to tell it the first row to start reading data, and that's going to be row 2 for this file that I have. So I'll change that to a 2. And now I'm ready to import the file. All I have to do is click Import. and it's going to tell me how many records it read, which you can find in your Excel file, how many rows you have. When you say OK, it added them. If you have quite a few, like if I would have went with that original file, it will create more sequences. I think it can only do 100, maybe 100 lines per sequence. Either way, this fit into one sequence, so it just added one sequence. And all that's going to show in our batch now. So you should know your total for your budget, and that should match this run total. If you want to look at any of the accounts, you can go back into the batch, type in the sequence, and all of these will be imported right here. So if you mis-entered one, you can always come back in and change that at this point. You can update. Again, the key here, making sure that this run total matches what your expense budget's supposed to be. Once we have that, all we're going to do is suspend the batch, because we can't update this batch until we roll the year. Oh yeah, if you want to, you can do 93,918, and we'll suspend. Okay. You can do the same thing for the revenue side. You can run your revenue account description. That'll give you your accounts, your save to Excel. Save your file wherever you want to save it. Now we have our revenue budget. Again, we'll delete out these top two lines. They are not needed. I don't like the descriptions, so I delete those. And then in here, we're just going to add our budget for each line item. You will have this file. You can leave it. It'll tell you it can't import this record, or if you want, you can delete it. Same thing, if you put a total on this and there's no account here, you write the word total, you can still pull the file in. It'll just tell you you can't process that record. It'll process all the other records just fine. So we have our file. Now we need to turn it into a CSV. So we go, do our file, save as, tell it where you want to save it. We already have our expense budget, so now we just need to change the type to a CSV. Say save. Do you want to keep this format? Yes. When I close, I already saved it, so I don't need to resave. It is now right here. We go back. Same thing. We're going to go ahead. This time we're going to do the revenue budget entry. We'll do a new. Make sure your mode is the original. And make sure your batch has a January 17 date. Go ahead and update. And we're ready for our file import. So you find your file. Here's our revenue budget CSV. We open it. Okay, so this, again, this is going to tell you, do you want to use the last import definitions, which is the columns mapped. We don't necessarily know what those were, so we're going to go ahead and say no. Now we know our two, so we're going to take our account and map it. Take our amount, map it. Again, data doesn't start until row 2. So I'm going to do row 2 here. And I'm going to import my file. 296 records. Okay, so here's one where one of our records did not validate. So we can say yes. Let's see, 44 sequences for this one. And now, so if you get a record that doesn't validate, you should be able to see this total would be different than what was in your Excel file. Let me see if that's the case. So we have 43,660, and Authority Finance has 43,660. So I know it tried to process just a blank line, and I don't have to worry about that. My budget matches here, same as it matches in here. The line it couldn't process was just a blank line. I'm not worried about that. So I can add in my total here and suspend my batch until I roll over into the new year. Also, if you don't, for some reason, want to do the export or import of a budget, you can just start a new budget batch, set your mode as O, set your date, hit update, and manually enter these items. If you go into the batch, you can start a new sequence and then start these. Okay. And then you could add your amounts. Another way to do it is to merge accounts. You can merge in accounts. You could do a match. So if you know, like, all of your revenues are 0, 0, 0s, you could say this is going to give me every fund with my revenue code and every object. And you can say merge. Carrots in this application?
Could be carrots.
It might be carrots instead of stars here. We'll find out. Let's say merge. Okay. I'll have to ask about the wildcard on this. I thought you could wildcard that, but if you wanted to grab every account, you could also do the account range and say 000 to 999, similar to how you would run reporting for all of your accounts. And you can merge that way. It'll go out and it'll grab every single revenue account, and then you can go through and add your budget as need be. And just like that, and you can update. Again, import's probably the easiest. You can work on that Excel file outside of finance, and then once you're done with it, just load it back up into finance. Any questions on budget upload? Okay, if you guys have any questions, we can always circle back to it at the end as well. Go ahead and suspend that batch. Okay, so we have entered our budget. Next thing to do is to look at your vendor files. Make sure that you don't have multiple vendors with different numbers. Just basically do a quick housekeeping before you roll the year. In your accounts payable menu, you have your vendor reports. And you can run, I would say, vendor name report would probably be your best bet to look for duplicate vendors. Okay, so again, all the I's are inactive vendors. They're already inactive. If you wanted to take those off the list, you could change your status up here to only active vendors. Then view your report. Okay. So again, these are sorted in your vendor number order. So if you want to switch it to vendor name, you can click on these little arrows to get it in vendor name order. A little bit easier to identify vendors that have the same name. They'll kind of show up together when they may be different vendor numbers apart. Okay, so here's our vendor list sorted by vendor name. If we could see, so maybe like these two are actually the same vendor. So we could say that 4313 and 2213 are actually the same vendor, and we need to combine them into one file. To do that, you can do a vendor renumber, and that's under your vendor maintenance menu. The vendor renumber. So basically just, I would go into vendor maintenance and figure out which one you want to keep as the main vendor and put that, and that's going to be your new vendor number. So the one you don't want to keep anymore, we'll say that's 4313. We want to combine everything under vendor 2213. And it'll tell you this is going to copy everything from 4313 ABCO fire protection to 2213 ABDO home remodelers. So we authorize that. Now all that payment data and everything will be assigned under that new vendor. You can also run the vendor status report. And you can use this to find vendors that you may no longer use anymore. If you haven't paid a vendor in maybe a couple years, you might think about inactivating that vendor just to try to keep, again, your files as accurate and clean as possible. So again, it'll always tell you the last date paid. So basically, I don't want to hold on to any vendors that were paid after, who haven't been paid since 2014. So if I say I only want to see vendors paid up through 12/31 of 14, I can run that report. Should have used a further date. 14 was too new. Okay, so this gives me a list of vendors that I didn't pay in 2015, didn't pay in 2016, and could be considered inactive for 2017 if we're not going to use them. Again, you can always switch them to inactive, and you can always switch them back to active if you did need them later on. So again, you see a vendor that was last paid in 1996. If we click on their vendor number, it'll take us straight into their vendor maintenance. Well, this is vendor inquiry, so we got to go into vendor maintenance. And we're looking at vendors 4765. No, 3368, sorry. We're looking at vendor 3368. Again, hasn't been paid since 1996, so maybe we should consider making them inactive. Put an I in there, and you can update the file. So that's cleaning up our vendor file. Our next step is going to be determining our carryover POs. We need to get down into our purchasing menu, and we need to look at some purchase order reports to determine what POs we want to carry over, and we're carrying over the correct POs. So you can always start with an open PO status report. This will give you all the POs, especially if anything has a balance of 0, or you don't need the PO anymore. It may have a small balance. You need to go ahead and get those POs closed before you roll the year. You don't want to roll those POs over into the new year if you don't actually plan on using them. So once you have this list, you've been down through it, you know the POs, you've asked department heads, their plans for the POs, if they need them actually in 2016 dollars or not. You can close any other POs you don't plan on carrying over. The next step to this is to make sure that the PO is actually not negatively encumbered or over encumbered. We don't want to carry over encumbered POs. They will take away from your 2017 budget. So to do that, we can run our encumber by account and fund. Okay. And here we need to go through, and basically we need to make sure that all these amounts are positive. You can see this one right here has a negative encumbrance against it. We would need to either adjust that PO before we close the year, if it's an actual true carryover PO, or we just need to close the PO to get it out of here so that it doesn't become a carryover PO. So this report will show you any negative line items that are on a PO, and again, those need adjusted, corrected before we get into closing the year. Come down through, make sure everything looks pretty good. Looks good. So scroll through it, print it out, highlight your negatives, make sure you adjust those, take care of those before we close the month. Okay. So we have a couple libraries. Again, only libraries can do this under the Ohio Revised Code, but you have something called Apply Excess Prior. And what that'll do is it'll bring any prior monies back into the current year budget. You could encumber them on a 2016 PO and then roll that PO over into 2017 while still using the 2016 budget. To do that, you need to open up an expense budget entry, do a new batch. This one will need to be dated in the current year. And your mode is going to be a reuse excess budget. When you update that batch, you can then click on this apply excess prior. I have no accounts available. A box would pop up and it would show you, it would list you the account and the amount, and it would have a checkbox and it would ask you if you wanted to import that. If you wanted to, you could do select all. It would select all your accounts and it would bring that and add that to your current year budget. So it would basically add money to any of those current year expense accounts, which could then be encumbered. Yeah, it looks like this. This would be your account, your amount, and then you could apply them. And select all, and then you just apply. If you wanted to do a range of accounts, you could add those ranges in down here. Then you just click process, and it'll pull them all into your batch, and all you have to do is proof and update your batch. Okay, and again, only for libraries. You can only, that's the Ohio Revised Code, that is only for libraries. But you'll want to do that again too before you close the year. Okay. Another step, we're now into the section 3, entering any closing transactions. First thing we want to do is run an encumbrance report by PO. Okay, so this will show our encumbrances. Another good check to make sure that you have all your correct carryover POs. What we're mainly concerned with is at the very bottom. At the very bottom, if you see any of these with a V and a number, that's a voucher that's not attached to any specific PO. So it was a voucher that was entered in the current year or even a prior year that wasn't attached to a PO, and it will try to carry this over. If it carries over, though, it will not use 2016 budget. It will use 2016 or 2017 budget, excuse me. So if you run this report and see any of these, they need addressed. If you know it's okay to expense them with 2017 budget in January, let them go. They'll roll over just fine. If they need to be paid before you roll the year, make sure you get those paid. This is actually the voucher number, so you can look it up by this voucher number. Make sure you get it paid before you close the December month. A similar report that gives you the same information is under your end of month processing report, and it's called the open payables report by vendor. And again, this will show you any vouchers. This will actually show you vouchers that are with a PO and without a PO. So this one will actually tell you both of those. Again, if they're attached to a PO and they carry over, they're going to use $2016. If they are not attached to a PO, again, it'll use the $2017 if you carry them over into the new year. Okay. So again, more adjusting entries. If you have any bank interests or bank revenue that you need to enter, make sure you enter that with your receipt entry before you close the year. And any other special transactions that you might do at month end, you would want to do this again before you go ahead and try to close the month. Once you have all of that done, go ahead and balance your December month. Just like any other month, those would start with the end of month balancing report. Make sure everything is in balance. Anything out of balance will show up with a little red star. It appears that the limited data I have is all in balance. But from there, you're just going to do your normal end-of-month balancing process. Again, you can start this now, even though you have a couple weeks left, just to make sure you are in balance, and then that way when it does come time to actually close, that you already know or have a very good idea that you're in balance already. If there's problems, we need to go ahead and try to find those right away. Okay. Once you get your December month balanced, you're not going to close the year yet. We need to go ahead and run some end-of-year reports. You can also do your 1099 files before or after you close the year. So this is the only part where we're going to skip ahead. This is to number 6, and it's our year-end reports. So, again, with authority, you have a little bit more freedom because we can pretty much run any report for a prior year and still get the same data. Again, I would probably keep a save file and a printed file for audit purposes of all of these reports that you need to run at end of year, just so you know you have them. If you have to go back and run them again, no harm, but at least you have them. We'll start actually with a vendor report, and that's going to be the summary purchases report. Okay, again, you could restrict your status out to A's. And again, if you wanted to see maybe only people that had a year-to-date amount, so you can get rid of all these zeros, you can run this to okay. So this will show all of our active vendors and anyone that got paid this year. Again, you can use this as another 1099 proof to make sure you're getting all the right 1099 vendors. Okay. This is a report that you'll want to save, maybe to a PDF or print out and keep with that end of year stuff. Our next report is our detail reporting. Under our budget control, under your standard budget reporting, it's these detail transactions. So something for some of the larger clients, there's a small option you will want to check to make this report run. Because again, this report wants to be what's called infinite scroll, where you could scroll down the side unlimited. So you can see basically every transaction. That causes the report to run a very long time. Because again, if you wanted to do this for all of a year, you're going to have every single piece of detail for an entire year. Many of these would be 500, 600, 700 pages. So to do that, so if you look at like our detail expense transactions, this report will always default to the current month, so you really never have to worry about it. If you run this on a month-to-month basis, it probably should run fine. It might only be 20, 50 pages, and it will run. It may take 30 seconds or so, but it will run. When you try to get up into the multiple hundreds of pages, it will not run. So we can see this is an infinite scroll, but it basically just has one page, one of one. what you want to do before you change this date up here, you want to click on this button, and it's called the Print Layout button. If you click on this Print Layout button, it's now going to spool this report as if it were going to a printer page by page. It makes the pages load quite a bit quicker. It's going to just save you a lot of time. Otherwise, you'll think your system timed out, you'll think it's stalled, you'll call us. We'll click that button, it'll all work. So now, once you have that, we can go and we can say we want to see 01 of 2016. To 12 of 2016. We want to see all of our accounts. No need to add any other breaks or restrictions, so we'll run that report. Again, even in page layout, if you have 700 pages, this will take a little while to run just because there is so much data behind it. I have 3 pages. But yes, if this is not checked and you try to run this for a whole year, it will not work. So make sure that you check the print layout before you run any of these detail reports. 1 month is fine. A whole year, you're going to have problems. Okay. So each one of these detail reports, we would want to get our detail revenues. It's going to show all of our revenues by account. Our detail expense, that's what we got on the screen here. The detailed budget, if you wanted a copy of your current 2016 budget to use as a budgeting tool, you could run off the revenue and expense. If you do a lot of project reporting, you'll definitely want to do your project revenue and your project expense reports, and then your detailed bank transactions, which will just list out all of the bank transactions for your given year. All right. Okay, so those are all of our detail reports. We would want to, again, save those out to an end of year folder as a PDF or print them off, or both. All right. The next report that we want to make sure we get is our encumbrance report by account and fund. We've already ran this, so if you just save it earlier in the process, you already have it. So we would definitely want to have this report to show all of our balance as of end of year. So again, save as a PDF or print that out. And then the last one that you're going to definitely want is a check report. And that's going to be under your check processing and your check reconciliation. Okay. A few reports. You could run a complete check report. You can also run the check report in clear. Or check reconciliation report, and that'll give you a similar report. I prefer the complete check report just because you can run it and get your entire year's worth of checks in one report, quick and easy. Again, it's already set up for our 1/1/16 through 12/31/16. And again, you'll have to run this. If you cut checks from multiple banks, be sure you run it all for each one of your banks. A lot of times people only cut checks from maybe 1 or 2 different banks. So just be sure to have all of those reports. And again, if you forget a report, it can be fixed. All of these reports can be moved to prior year. So if you ran these, you would still get the data that would have been there at year end. So let's go to 15 here. So again, if we forgot for some reason at the end of 15 and needed this report, it's still here. So if you forget a report, not a big deal, but it's always nice to have them before you close the year. Okay, so we're going to go back to our 1099 processing now. This is step 5. So 1099s you can do, like I said, after you roll the month or before you roll the month, whatever's easier. If you have some time before the actual 31st, you know you're done with your last check run, I definitely recommend getting them out, getting them off your plate, and then just roll the month and you're good to go. If you're running behind and you do get into January, you know, you got to post, so you roll the month, not a big deal. You can still come back and run all of these 1099 files for the 2016 year. So we'll start with our generate 1099 vendor data. I've already tested this and processed the 2016 year. Manual edits will be lost. You want to continue. You guys probably won't see that since you haven't processed them yet, but if you ran it in maybe November to get a count, this box will come up. Just go ahead and authorize that. Say OK. And this is the box you will see. This will generate your 1099 data, and all you have to do is enter your authorization code. You can see all existing 1099 records for 2016 will be overwritten, and that's what we want to do. Once you have run this for end of year, you do not want to run it again, or like it said, you will lose any of the manual edits you made. We'll go over that. So our 1095 file has been built for 2016. We'll say OK. And we want to run our 1099 proof report. Okay, so this will break it down by code, and it'll list all your vendors and how much the amount is for. If you see someone on this list that shouldn't be on this list, you can remove them. If a vendor should be on this list and you don't see them, you can add them. If I go back and run my purchases report again, I think I have some vendors that should get 1099s. The system is telling me that they shouldn't, so we'll check that out. Again, I want to see all my vendors. I want to see anyone that was paid. Since we know it's cut off 600, I'll go ahead and say I want to see anyone that had a year-to-date paid above 600. Okay. So there's my one vendor, and I can see it's paid a little over $1,300, but my 1099 is only showing 1,100. So he must have had either an expense that wasn't 1099 eligible, or we need to correct that. Just look into that, see what that would be. On our other one, we can see that we had a vendor on here that got paid $700, and they should probably get a 1099 for that. So we need to look at this vendor number, 1711. We go into our vendor file maintenance, pull up 1711. Okay, so we can see their 1099 flag is set to none. They are not going to get a 1099 no matter how much we pay them. Maybe they're incorporated. Is that right? Yeah, incorporated. So maybe they're incorporated. If not, if this is just flagged incorrectly, we can change it to an M. You can also look at your 1099 and you can't. Change it to a 1099-M. What do you mean? Yeah. Okay. So that's correct. That's getting your vendor corrected. We still need to get their 1099 out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to manually add that 1099. So in our vendor 1711 and 70121. So let's go back to our 1099 menu, and we're going to edit our 1099 vendor data. So which year? We want to enter 2016. Should automatically pop up. Our vendor was 1711, and it's going to pull all that information in, their address. So this is why we didn't get it. Now we want to change this to an M, and we can update. Again, if we want to update, if you're changing anything on the address side, you have these options down here where it'll update just the 1099 you're about to print, or it'll update the main address on the vendor file with the new address, or it'll update both. If it's just the 1099 address, click this box. If it's a new address altogether, you would want to update both. So we'll go ahead and update. And now when we go back and run our 1099 proof, we should see both of those vendors now on it. If you wanted, again, where we saw that there was actually 1350 in purchases, and we're only showing 1100, and we want to fix that. Again, we can go into our edit, vendor 177, and we can see that these are the two that are adding up to the total. If we know that we needed to add an additional 200, you can add it here, make this 1300. And we'll click this edited box. It's just a flag telling us that this amount is edited, an edited amount. And we can update. So now that 1099 record will show the 1350. Oh yeah, it wasn't. Oh yeah. So okay. So Debbie was just pointing out this second line is an N, and that's why it didn't show. If we wanted it, if this was a true, needed to be on the 1099, we would want to change this to an M as well. And now it will show the whole 1354.95 on our proof report. Okay, so now we've updated that. If we rerun this report, now I have them on 2 lines.
There's 2 lines.
Okay. So if you have 2 lines, it'll give you two 1099s. So we would want to add that all to 1 line. So let's go back. Enter our vendor. And this we would just want to add 54.95. And we can remove this row. Now we update. So again, this 1099 proof report is the report you want to make sure is exactly right before you go into printing your forms. Okay, so now everything looks right. We have our additional vendor, we have the correct amount for our other vendor. All those changes we made would be wiped out if you did this generate 1099 again. That's why we don't only want to do it once. Make all of our changes in our edit, make sure our proof report is exactly right, and now we're ready to print forms. So if we click on our print 1099 forms, we're going to print our email selected records. We're going to say OK. This is going to launch authority forms. log into Authority Forms, or some of you guys have automatic logins. You would select the printer you want to use. I will use XPS Writer. We'll say OK. And your forms will begin printing out on the printer you selected. If you want to do them to a PDF printer or to the XPS like I did, you can always print them from that file. If you wanted to print them off to the printer first, come back and reprint them so that you had a file, you could do that as well. So I would say 2016 1099 now. And again, saving it to my desktop. And my process is complete. So again, now I have this file that I could print the 1099 from. You can print directly to this file. It'll work with the perforation that's on your 2-up form. And I also have this electronic copy saved for any other reason I may need to reprint it later. All right. So our last step is to create our 1099 electronic files. Before, should have talked about this earlier, but this 1099 electronic file header maintenance is all of your information. And this should be proof before you get started on that. Should have went over it, but yeah, you just want to make sure that your name, address, state zip, tax ID, TCC numbers are all in here, because these go into that file. It pulls this from, yeah, so it pulls this information from that file. So if any of that is incorrect, your 1099s would be incorrect. So make sure that's good before you start your 1099 edits and your print and your proof. Make sure that your header file is good. Okay, so we are ready to do our 1099 electronic file. We click on this menu option. For our media type, we can do a drop down. And again, we want an IRS electronic submission for 1099Ms. We would enter our tax year. It'll tell us we have 2 for this amount. Put our authorization in. Say OK. This will give you a proof report of what it's actually going to send. It'll, again, similar to your 1099 proof, it'll break down your vendors, their amounts, what boxes, and the descriptions, and then give you a summary of everything. Print this out, save it, keep it for your records. As soon as you close this report, it'll tell you that 2 1099 files are generated. You can say OK, and it's going to want you to save them somewhere. So again, back to your desktop, back to your end-of-year file, wherever you're saving all of your documents. You can leave it in this form. You can rename it whatever you want. You can say 1099 IRS upload. Shouldn't make a difference. Make sure this file type stays blank. That's important. Otherwise, it won't upload. And then you can say save. And that file should look like this on your desktop, just like a little blank piece of paper, because it's a data file. Once you do, you just log on to the IRS website. You'll have an Explore or File Find. You'll click on that, find your file, upload it to the IRS. It should be all good. Any questions on the 1099 reporting? Okay. All right, so we've ran our year-end reports. We've balanced our December month. We've done our 1099s. We are ready to close the year. What I would do is I would do whatever day this falls on that you're ready. I would go ahead and leave for the night. Your system automatically does a backup of your Authority Finance system every single night. So if you leave at this stage, your Authority Finance backup will run. You can have your IT, or if you do it, whoever does it, pull the backup and use that as your end of year backup. If it's in the middle of the day and you need to do it, we can always run the backup right away. If you call us, we'll get on there and we'll run you backup, and then you can pull that off as your end of year account save. Very important that you get an end of year account save, because if something goes wrong, we're going to have to pull a backup file, and more than likely you've done quite a bit of work to close the year, and we could potentially lose that data depending on when it was entered and when your last good backup was. So if you have any questions on your end of year save, give us a call before you do any kind of closing. We'll make sure it's straight. Like I said, it will back up itself every night. So if you leave, come in the morning, you will have a backup. Make sure your IT has that, and then you can run your end of month close. So to run our end of month close, same process as closing any other month. If you want to run back through, make sure everything's still in balance. That's not going to hurt anything. What we'll want to do is, the first thing, we're going to close our cash month. When we close our cash month, we'll give it a close date, maybe 1/3/17.
That's the end of the month. The month 12.
That's this one. This is just a recording date in the system. It doesn't care. So then we're going to tell it we want to close month 12. Okay, so we have a transaction batch that's not updated. I'll go ahead and clean that up. So this will just tell you anything. Transaction batches are all in the budget menu. So we'll go ahead and go into our budget menu. Transaction batch status report. Okay, so we can see all of our 2016 budget batches are in here. We have this excess batch that we opened we need to close, and then we're going to need to close the receipt pay-in batch. So batches 4810 and 4814. Excess and pay-in. Again, we can find this batch that was in 16. It's got to be closed. Again, you shouldn't run into any of this because you've already balanced and you're good. I'll go ahead and close it. Skip the proof and just run the update. Okay, and then we had the excess batch. Okay, so 12. Cleaned up our batches. We are now ready to close the month. We go back over to our AP menu, and we're ready to close our cash month. Enter in the date, and tell it you want to close month 12. It'll tell you it's going to close the month. Here's the date it's going to record that you closed it, and we're closing month 12. So we put in a Y, star, 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 say OK. Okay, so our cash month has been closed. All right. Next will be closing the voucher month. One thing I forgot before starting these closed cash and closed voucher month, you want to probably get everybody out of finance. You don't want to take the risk of someone being in a record and locking something up. So you can run a system, list all database users, and you can see all the users. Anything with an open status is connected to the database, and you would want to get them out before you actually did the closed cash or closed voucher month. So close your voucher month. I'm going to close month 12. Yeah, it's going to tell us. We'll enter in our authorization. And our voucher month has been closed. Or if you come and run a set posting date, you can now see that the current cash period is 01 and the current voucher period is 01, so you know that you're in January. So you have January and February open now. You shouldn't run into the issue like we are where you still have the system date still in December. Won't create any issues. It'll just try to open batches with a 12/41 or 12/14 date, and it won't work. But you can just change it to 1/1. It'll work. So closed our cash, closed our voucher. Need to make sure that everything did reset. So we want to go in and do a budget menu. Look at our standard budget reports. First one I would run a month-to-date, year-to-date current expense report. In this particular situation, current's important because it will only show current year. We did carry over quite a few POs. If we ran the total, which we will in a second, you'll see it's going to have encumbrances. Those are all those prior year encumbrances. Okay. So this report, our current, unless you had already started entering January transactions before you closed, this should all be 0. The reason we have these few figures down here is if you remember back when we were running our PO, our encumbrance by PO report, and we had those couple of vouchers that weren't attached to POs, they carried over into 2017, and now they're being expensed against my 2017 budget. That's why mine aren't. If you clear those up, this should be all zeros. I know what those are. If you know what yours are, you're fine. When we run the total, which maybe you guys call combined, it will do current and prior year. And this one, like I said, will show some the carryover amounts that you have here. It combined your appropriation, it brought that over into your revised appropriation. It is 2016 budget money that is being expensed there. But the total report will show all of those carryover amounts. If you printed your encumbrance by account and fund report, which you should have or should have saved, you should notice that the encumbrance amount on that report should match the encumbrance amount down here. Because all this is carryover. We haven't actually posted anything, so this number would match exactly what we carried over from our 2016 encumbrance report. All right, we're good with that. We can run the same thing for our revenue. If we run a month-to-date, year-to-date revenue report, you don't carry over revenues, so unless you've entered receipts with a 2017 date, this should be completely blank. All zeros. So we know our year-to-date column is reset, so we are in the new year. Our month-to-date will reset because we're in January. All right. Last thing that we have to do now is post those budget numbers. So we entered all those budgets, or if you want to enter the budget now, you could. We already entered them, so we have our, we have that expense budget entry. This was our expense budget. Now we are ready to close it. Close our budget. We would run our expense budget proof. proof this over real good one more time. Make sure your total matches your expense budget, or maybe your temporary expense budget if you're not getting a full budget entered right away. Again, you can proof this, make sure everything looks correct. Good total. So we're going to go ahead and do our expense budget update. And we're going to post that budget. This is item 10 if you're following along. Okay, so our expense budget has been posted. Do the same thing with our revenue budget. Yeah, I'm just not typing very well today. Okay. Run your proof. I should see this one. And verify your totals. Looks good. I am ready to post. Yeah. And the authority general GL fund. Yeah. Almost. Okay.
Mine's already got my own all servers. Look at this.
Just hope, fingers crossed, there's no Okay, so we have our expense and our revenue budgets uploaded into the system. We can rerun those current reports. So we can rerun our current expense report, and we should now see all of our revenue budget data that we just updated in there. All right, yep, so there's my revised appropriation amounts. And if you add in your carryover, or no, this is just current, so this number down here should match your 2017 budget. If you run the total expense report, you could add your total current year with your carryover, and that's what the total would be on the combined, or the total expense report. We run the revenue report, should see the same thing. All of our budget amounts are entered. Good. We haven't actually collected anything, so everything is uncollected balance, and that should match our current revenue budget. All right. A couple last little items to consider. If you run, if you do auto numbering on your POs, I know it's popular to start your first 2 digits with the month, or with the year, I'm sorry. You'll want to change that so that your next auto number will come up. You can do that in your PO class maintenance. So if you need to reset each one, you start with your RGs. The last number used, you would want to use, if you want to start with actual 17 or 100 with 4 zeros, you would put in 169999. If you want to start with 170001, put in 170000, like that. You would update, and you can do that for each one of your classes. If you use different numbering system, again, just update this number with whatever you use, and it will resume your auto numbering with the year 17, so you can quickly identify those POs that are current year versus prior year. If we have any general ledger, if you use general ledger, give us a call and we can go through that individually. I don't know that we have any currently using general ledger in authority finance, but if you are, give us a call. We can walk you through the closure of those steps. Finally, there is an end-of-year update for authority finance. As soon as we're in the tail end of testing that should be done here shortly. You guys will all get the update. We will load it onto your system for you, update everything, and you will just see rollouts of the update on your computer once it's installed. You will get an e-news once we start doing that with all of the release notes, what's changed, what's updated. If you have any questions, just give us a call or email us, and we can go over any of that with you. At this time, we are all done. Do we have any questions? No questions. We have 16 attendees that will all have a flawless end-of-year close. All right, guys. Well, if you do think of any questions, again, give us a call, shoot us an email. We can answer any of those. If you'd like help with any of this, again, call, let us know. We can schedule a time that works well for everybody. And then thank you guys for attending. Bye-bye.